Male nipples. Now that got your attention. This is tip number 1. I've got quick tips for you to help with your gesture drawing. So check out this pose right here. Well, one of the things that's happening in this pose, and when we're doing a gestural drawing, what we're doing is we're trying to draw what's happening. Rather than copying everything that we see, we're trying to explain the big things that's happening in the pose. One of those things in this particular pose is that the shoulder is coming up, right? It's like arm is stretched up, and with it, the shoulder pivots up towards the head. And because it's come up like this, the chest is now stretching, right? The pectoral muscle of the chest is stretching up to this higher position of where the shoulder has now is. And what sits on top of the chest is the nipple. So in a sort of neutral position, the nipple might be shaped something like this, but because it is stretching, that you can see that shape, it's now more stretched towards where the shoulder is. So what we get instead of this shape is we get this shape, right? This shape gets stretched towards where the shoulder's gotten to. And it's just a little shape that helps to explain what's happening in the pose. And we're not going to use a lot of information in our sketch. So this is a simple gestural sketch. But check out, I've definitely paid attention to the shape of that nipple and made sure it was pulling up towards the shoulder. If you didn't do that, if you just kept it in its sort of neutral position, hey, you know what? It wouldn't be the end of the world. But it would no longer have that feeling of stretching up to where it's going. So it adds quite a bit. One more example. So this time we have one shoulder really coming up. The other one is not coming up so much. It's a bit more of a neutral position. It's worth mentioning here that when you just raise your arm out to your side, the movement is just happening in the ball joint inside the shoulder. When you raise it up beyond that, can't really go any further just with the ball joint. Now things start to pivot from here, from the middle of the collarbones. The collarbone starts to pivot up, right? So this is like shrugging. You can bring up your collarbone. You can shrug your shoulder up towards your ear, right? It pivots up towards your ear. And then when you raise your arm, that's what's happening. So because of this, the whole shoulder on this side has shifted up. On this side, the shoulder hasn't really pivoted up. And so this nipple here is showing that because it's in this neutral shape. It's just a neutral shape nipple, right? I never thought that that would be a phrase I would say in my professional career. This is a more, dynamically shaped nipple because it is stretching towards where the shoulder's gone. So when I come to do my sketch, one thing that I do is because that shoulder is raised, that nipple now has actually come up a little bit. It's actually not just stretching, but it's also slightly in a higher position. And this is why nipples are a tricky landmark, because they're not really structural. They can move around as the shoulders and stuff move around. So, stuff like the middle of the collarbones here, this is a structural landmark, right? Whereas the nipples, they can move as the muscle stretches and things. And so when I get to my sketch, I'm thinking about that. You can see my shape I've done for this nipple is stretched towards that shoulder. This one is a more neutral one. So this adds that little bit extra to your gesture drawings. Tip number 2 is about belly buttons. Now at this point, you might be thinking, Kenzo, man, every video you say, it's not about the details. It's not about the details. Now you're saying it's about nipples and belly buttons. They seem like small details. But notice that I'm saying you can include these little things because they're really quick, simple ways of explaining to the viewer something big and simple. It's not some kind of little hairs and little wrinkles of the knuckles or something which don't really explain anything. In these drawings, I wouldn't even put in individual fingers, or toes or anything like that. But I do include these because they explain big stuff like the nipple shape explains, where the shoulder is and things. Another thing is that in a simple sketch, if I put the belly button in, then the viewer knows where the center line is. They know what, you can just draw the center line as well if you want. But if you just put in the belly button, the viewer can figure out where that center line is, and that helps them to understand the twisting that's happening up here, right? Because the center line, the way that we understand twisting is with what's on each side of that center line. You see how the far side of this center line, this shape here, is getting narrower, it's disappearing. Because we're looking at this part right from the side, whereas down at the hips, it's starting to turn towards us. We're seeing a little bit more of the far side of that center line. And the belly button is a quick indication of that. So what does this mean? What is the quick tip? Well, the first thing is I want to really observe where this belly button is going to go. That's the first thing, the most basic thing. I don't want to accidentally place it here, which is very easily done. You kind of think of the belly button as being kind of in the middle of the tummy, and then you just kind of accidentally place it over here. I want to observe, where is it? How far is it from each side, like this? But my quick tip here, my small quick tip for you is not just a dot for the belly button, because if I want to show which way this belly button is facing, I can show that with the shape that I give it. So a belly button that's looking right towards me, maybe it would look like this. But as it turns and rotates to one side, it might start to take on a shape more like that, right? Because I'm kind of seeing that indent that happens from the belly button, right? So if the belly, let's say I get a neutrally shaped belly button like this, and then if I'm looking at it like this from this side over here, that shape I use might become more like that, or if it was facing the other way, I might kind of make it a bit more like that. It's a pretty small thing, but if you notice the shape that I've used here, the shape that I've used helps me to show that things are facing out this way. You notice in this sketch, I haven't used many lines. I haven't rendered it. I haven't included a lot of details. So the little things that I do include, if I'm going to include that nipple shape and that belly button shape, I want to make them explain the bigger thing that they're sitting on, so that the viewer can fill in those blanks. So another little example here in this belly button is where I actually think I could have done this better. I kind of messed it up and it is kind of a little bit of a mess. I think I could have shown with this belly button shape, I could have shown firstly how the tummy is stretching by stretching it out a bit, and then just shown which way it's facing by kind of explaining how it's indented, or which side it's indented on, which I don't think I made that clear here. So maybe I could improve this, by making it simpler and making it explain what is happening in this pose, a little bit better. So I don't know, maybe something like that. I want to show that we're looking at that belly button from the side. So it's not going to be a big, wide, thick shape, because we're kind of looking at it from the side. And I want to show which direction it's facing in. And also, ideally, I could show even that the tummy is kind of stretched out by stretching it out a bit. So earlier I was talking about nipples and belly buttons and how they really help to explain what's happening in the torso, just these little indications, little shapes. So on the head, an ear is quite like that, because firstly, the ear has a shape which looks like this. So if the ear is like that, it means it's looking that way, and if the ear is like that, it's looking that way. So that's nice. But even more important than that, where it is on the head helps explain where the head is facing. So if I put in a sort of simple egg shape for a head, and if I put the ear here, that means we're kind of looking at the side of the head, and often the front of the ear is going to be kind of in the middle of that shape. If I put that ear over here now it means that the head is turned away from me, right? I'm looking now at the back of that head. And if I place the ear shape, over here, Now it's more like, okay, the head is starting to turn towards me a bit more. So I like to really place that ear to help show which way the head is facing. I usually just make it really obvious by also putting in the eyebrow line, the line across the brow. So you can see in here, for example, that line across the brow, which I use. But here I try and place that ear quite early on in all of these to just help show which way the head is facing. So some of those quick tips, I hope that a broader principle was made clear from those, which is that what we're trying to do is explain as simply and easily as possible what is happening in this pose. Which way is this part of the torso facing? What's happening with the shoulder? Which way is the head facing? And I just want to explain that in the most concise and simple way possible. So if a small thing is going to help explain it, I might include that. If it's not going to help, I'm going to exclude it. And so I'm boiling it all down to what's the minimum amount that I can use to explain what's happening in here. Now, when I say what's happening, I'm mostly talking about what's the relationships between the big masses of the figure. Which way are the hips facing versus which way is the rib cage facing versus which way is the head facing, right? So if the hips are facing one way and the head is facing over there, there's a twist happening. Or if the hips are on one angle and then the rib cage is on the other, there's going to be a squash and a stretch happening. So I'm trying to draw that relationship, and whatever helps me to explain that as simply as I possibly can, that's what I'm practicing with these drawings. In order to get that understanding, what is happening in this pose, check out our Fresh Eyes free mini course. The link is below. It's just going to take you through the basics of this idea. And if you really want to get into this and you really want to get good at gesture drawing, we have a sequence of courses in our study group, as well as one-to-one support and practice sessions where you can really, really understand this and get really good at this. So check that out. Our study group is our membership and our Fresh Eyes is our mini course, so you can see what learning with us is like. If you can capture the simple version of what's happening in a pose, your figure drawings are going to look so cool. And to keep on with this theme, here's another video about gesture drawing. I'll see you over there.